I want to just thank everyone. Certainly the panelists are here and anyone who is calling in. And I want to talk a little bit first about where this ideal came from and how important I think it is. You know, I'm one of those people who really believes that if you don't know your past, you are going to get lost in your presence sometimes. And one of the best ways to know your past is to talk to people and learn from people who have been there before you. And that's where this is coming from. And that's where we started. Now, the people, and everyone will introduce themselves on this thing, but these are the people I've always seen as the one-man band. And by a one-man band, I mean that in the early days when they started, they would write the grants, they would supervise the staff, they would take people out. So it's like they played the harp, they played the fiddle, and they played the cymbal with their knees. And so it wasn't like it is today when you have a lot of people to assist you and to help you. So these are really the founders. These are the people, and there are some more that we didn't get on the line today who are also part of that process. But I need to say this myself, because I've never said this to any of the ladies on here today. You are my heroes. And you have always been my heroes because you have been able to get it done without the support and the help of anyone else but each other. And I think that's great. Anytime I went anywhere when we were involved in doing these things, somebody would call up and pay for my ticket. Somebody would pay for my hotel room. I never worried about those kind of things happening because I had staff and I had people involved and you guys didn't. And so some of those early stories I think are incredibly humorous, but they go a long way towards showing who you are and how this wonderful organization started. What happened?
Keep talking, nothing, keep talking.
I can keep talking. Kathy's here to tell me exactly what to do. So why don't you introduce yourself first and say who you are and what year you started doing this crazy thing that we do. You want to start, Patti, because we'll be going to you first a lot because you got to leave and go to work.
Well, that's all right. I probably started this work when Robin was 5 years old in kindergarten, and her teacher told me that she would never learn to read, write, or do math and basically be a vegetable. And I decided that if I settle for that, that's what I would get. And that's what Robin would get. And so I started learning, and I found out before we had PTI grants before the Federation. And I found a PTI grant, and I started going around every place they trained with a tape recorder until I memorized the federal law. And anywhere I went, whatever with my daughter, they couldn't pull any wool over my eyes because I already knew that I could tell them what page number they could find the law. And so then I was hired by I helped write the PATH grant. And I co-wrote it with Janice Meyer. And then we were training all over the country, all over the state. And then the school district hired me. They said, we want you to be our ally, not our enemy. And I shared an office quadrant with the special education director. And so he would consult with me about decisions about very expensive services for kids. The family partner role is not the role I had. My role was like an assistant to the special education director and the superintendent. I would do training with the superintendent of my school district. He was a professor at the University of Houston teaching doctoral superintendents. And so I've never seen another family partner get to that level without a formal education other than high school. But that's how I grew from the PTI grants to becoming involved with the Federation of Families as a founding member.
Okay.
And Robin reads on a college level, by the way.
So during those early days and stuff, because I've heard the story about the closet, and I want you to tell people about the closet. which would have scared me to death, but go ahead.
Are you talking about me again?
Yeah, Patti.
Okay. So also I want to say one time I got to the airport and I didn't find my ATM card and I didn't have any cash. And I just so happened to run into Barbara Huff and she paid my bus fare to the hotel until I could pay her back. Do you remember that, Barbara?
No, I
You
don't.
did. So there's a lot of those stories all over, but you did. What did you want me to say, Carl? I don't remember.
About the closet.
The closet. Oh, we had this conference in Washington and it was a hotel we weren't used to staying in. And I was coming in late and they said, well, you can stay in my room, but I got there like at 1 or 1:30 in the morning. So I snuck in and everybody was in there. I think Terry Toothman and Connie Wells, they were in their beds. They were sound asleep. And I went, I'm not going to bother anybody. And there was this huge closet. So I just pulled some blankets and stuff off the ledge of the closet. And I just made a little pallet on the floor and went to sleep. And then Connie doesn't know this, I don't think, but the next day somebody was talking about having a mouse in their room. And I just about had a heart attack because I would have died if there'd been a mouse in that closet. But yeah, it was a really large room and a really large closet. And I didn't bother anybody. I just went to sleep in the closet.
Well, you were the mouse in the closet.
I guess I was.
So where were you getting money from in order to travel and to do these kind of things in those days? Did you get support from someplace?
Well, for a long time, my salary came from Conroe Independent School District. I had the PATH, well, I'd left the PATH project. I had those small grants that were like $25,000 and that wasn't enough to travel and to do Texas. So my salary came from the school district and my office was donated by the Community Mental Health Center. And then that gave me $24,000 for whatever expenditures for my work separate from the school district. As our grants got larger, I was able to contract some with the mental health. They matched the funds from my grant. And that gave me a capacity to further expand statewide because we have 254 counties in Texas. So there's no way even $50,000 is going to be effective trying to connect at least one family from each county. It wasn't enough. So we went around looking for small contracts and little, fundraisers and tried to help families. Many of them, like Denton was able to secure a grant from their mental health center and have an office in their building. But we truly did things on less than a shoestring. It was probably a rubber band or something, but it wasn't even a shoestring. But we managed.
Is there anything that you want to say to young people who are starting out doing this kind of stuff?
Yes, go back and read the original books. Go back and read where we started. Go back and read that this work was not handed to us. It wasn't I hate the word entitlement. Let me think of something. It's not a given. The work, the foundation we laid is very important. And so I always say, if you can find that Karl Dennis book, Karl and Ira book, find it and read it. That'll give you, because if you talk about the television here this morning said, well, we're about to start wraparound services. And I want so bad to bother them and give them the definition, but I'm just not so sure that's the right thing to do. But they need a history. They need to act. They need to participate in some of the groundwork to appreciate the level of work they're hired to do.
Thank you. So I also need to point out, though you're all women here, there have been men involved, and sometimes a husband. Norman Smith was his best friend and was very, very instrumental in my development and what I learned too. So let's see. So now we can go back and forth. I don't have a problem with that. I just wanted to make sure that Patti got to talk some before she had to go to work. So Jane, you haven't said a word. Let's hear something from you.
Well, I'm so glad to see Dixie appear on the screen.
seeing everybody is a big thing for me. You know, I started this with a call before there was a federation or a Keys for Networking. My daughter, who was in middle school, she's 50 next week, by the way, so that'll tell you the length of this. Um, my daughter began to do some very strange things, and I was afraid I would lose her. And somebody where I worked said, you know, there's a woman in Wichita, Kansas, who's doing some new things with families, and she might be a person you could talk to. And I called Barbara Huff that same day, and she started saying things to me like, listen to yourself, trust yourself, you know, learn to say no. I mean, those kinds of things which were unheard of where I was at the time. So that's how I started. I also came late to Keys for Networking because Barbara had started Keys with many other people. And so when she left to go to Washington, there were a couple people between her and then I came. And so we were funded. And I learned my first big time lesson in this world is that those grants die. And that's a hard, you think you've got some money and then poof. And so learning to write, learning who could help me, learning the people. That's why it's just so nice to see people new and old on this screen today. Learning people who would help me, who could help me, and who did help me become my friends and lifelong partners, closer than most of my family. So it's really good to see people today.
Yes. Do you still get a lot of phone calls?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm still working. And so I have phone calls this morning left to get on a phone, left those phone calls to do this. So I get a lot of phone calls.
Okay. So Barbara is still working, Patty's still working, Sue's still working.
I'm mostly not working, Carl.
You're mostly not working.
Right.
But you are working some. Huh?
Oh, well.
That's what I used to say all the time.
I did a little project for Sue and I did a little project for Delphi. And I volunteer quite a bit of time to just talk to family organization leaders that maybe need some advice about something. So, you know, it's no salary anymore. I came back and worked for Jane for a little while, isn't it? You know, it's kind of an opposite, you know, and but it was fun.
That's neat.
But, you know, I kind of like the no stress right now. It's kind of okay. I'm 76 this month and I deserve probably
a baby. So Barbara,
Robin wants to wave real quick. Just wave, Robin. Okay.
Hey, Rob.
Hello.
So Barbara, just tell us what it was like in the early days when you first started it with this.
Well, I did interior decorating work. I actually staged model homes for about 3 years after I was divorced and back to work. And Christy had been diagnosed with a really serious kidney disease. And like Jane's daughter, she's now in her early 50s. And the mother of my 3 grandchildren and very successful business owner. And so I go back to tell you that she had been, after dealing with a kidney disease for a couple of years, she became anorexic. And that threw us from the health system into the mental health system. And she'd been on special education with a learning disability. And so all of this just kind of started when she was really about 6. And you know what? I had nobody. And I had absolutely nobody. And I called Rosemary Moore at the Mental Health Association. And I said, I need to know where to go for help for her. And Rosemary said, you know, there's a doctor out in Newton whose daughter has anorexia. And so she said, let me call him and I'll have him call you. And she did that. And it was the first time I ever knew and understood what parent-to-parent support meant and the power of it all, because it really saved my life and hers. And so they gave me the name of a doctor at KU Med Center. They were just starting, just opening up, kind of opening up the world to eating disorders. And so she was there for outpatient for a long time. But in the meantime, I was on a state special ed advisory board, and a lot like Jane and Patti, I got kind of my first introduction into all of this through education, through the Department of Education. And the state director asked me if I'd be willing to help write a grant for the Parent Training and Information Center, which Patti referred to as the PTI earlier. And I did that. And I went to work for them and helped families across disabilities, did a lot of training for the Parent Training Information Center, to the point where the Department of Mental Health had a grant in the mid-'80s. And it was called CASP, the Child Adolescent Service System Program. And every state got one of those to help build an infrastructure for mental health. And
Barbara, I wrote that grant.
I know. I remember, and John Vandenberg, I think, was he the first director of that grant? I think he was.
Yeah.
And so we have two pioneers way, way back in Kansas. And the Department of Mental Health, after John left, another person became the director of that CASP grant. It's last year. And he said, we've got some leftover money, and I'm going to offer the PTI $45,000 to include families who have children with mental health needs in their work and in their enrichment weekends and the things that they do. And you know what? They turned it down. They said, no, we don't want to serve that disability.
Yes, I remember.
The state came back to me, the State Department of Mental Health, said, do you want that $45,000? In fact, I think Jane was on my very first board of directors, along with a few other wonderfully supportive people and lots of family members. And we started Keys for Networking. And so every CASP grant in every state had to have family involvement, but nobody really knew what that meant. But they had, a lot of them had started family organizations. A lot of them had given money to existing organizations and family members to start new organizations. So that CASP money was very instrumental in all of many of our beginning efforts. And so I'm going to try to shorten this up, Karl. Okay, so that's kind of how I started. And then in about 1988, we had some money in the Department of Education and the Department of Mental Health at the federal level, who sponsored a meeting called Next Steps. And Dixie was a part of that. And we gathered together in Washington, D.C., actually in Arlington, right across the river. And we met for a couple of days. There were 100 of us, 75 families and 25 very supportive professionals. And at the end of the meeting, to make a very long story short, at the end of the meeting, 18 of us signed on a sheet of paper that we would like to meet again. And Naomi Karp offered her basement. Dixie was there in that first meeting in the basement. I was there. And so we met in Naomi's basement with NAMI. And we asked NAMI, I had all these turn down experiences. I was the acting president by then. We had just said, Barbara, would you be? And that's how I became. And so I was still living in Kansas. Dixie was in Minnesota. We had a parent from Alaska. We were from all over, and we had we had even some back then representative diversity. Not big, but a tiny bit. And so anyway, we decided at that meeting with NAMI, we said to NAMI, would you take on kids issues? And they said no. So we said, well, then I guess we're going to have to start our own organization to take on kids' issues if you're not going to. And they said, no, they would be happy to be part of a coalition or some kind of collaboration, but they did not want to do kids' mental health. Their issues were too big, not enough money, you know, a lot of different reasons why. And they left. They got up off the sofa, I'll never forget, walked up those basement steps and left. And they even wrote a letter to make sure that the Department of Mental Health at the federal level didn't fund us. I mean, they were pretty hostile. They were not good partners at that point in time. And so anyway, we met for a year, all the 18 of us. Any way we could get money, anybody that would donate their airline points. A few of us had a little bit of money and we'd get a hotel room with 4 of us sleeping in 2 beds, maybe on the floor. And I think Dixie brought her sleeping bag and slept in Naomi's basement, if I remember. And so we named ourselves the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. The 18 of us did. And the next very big step really was that we were a volunteer organization. We met when we could gather ourselves together, mostly with that CAS money, because since they had to have family involvement, they were willing to spend a little of it on our travel and sometimes on an airline ticket. And so those directors of mental health in those states were, many of them, very good to us. And they realized and recognized the need for a national organization. So then we just, we ventured out trying to find a family member in every state that would become contacts with us. We were all volunteers and I was still in Kansas. And then we had this incredible opportunity and we were approached by the Annie E. Casey Foundation asking if we would be interested in being involved in their Urban Children's Mental Health Initiative. And our board voted yes. And then, to make another long story short, I moved to Washington to get the doors open, and the National Mental Health Association gave us very inexpensive office space in Alexandria, Virginia, and loads of people whose shoulders we stood on. Chris Green wrote our newsletter every couple of months, and we had a lot of support, a lot of people like Karl, and that we knew we could count on, that we trusted. And so I stayed about 13 years and then moved back to Kansas and took a small part-time job home with me in the area of social marketing, working with systems of care, and worked until about a year ago. So that's my story, Karl.
That's great.
So, a lot of things in between.
So how many people on the line here today were part of those 18? Dixie was part of them. Sue Smith was part of them.
Sue
Patti.
was the initial 18. Sue was about a year later. Sue scared me.
I was at the Next Steps. I was at the Next Steps meeting in Arlington.
Okay.
Okay.
That's when I met Dixie.
And Dixie
So
was.
Dixie, are you with us? Can we hear you?
She comes in and out. I noticed on the
Okay.
screen.
So then, Sue, why don't you tell your experiences then in the early days? Oh, just before you do this, when Barbara talked about trusting us, you know, in terms of a story I always laugh about today, she had come in and the person she was going to stay with at the hotel had not shown up. And I just happened to turn around to Barbara and I said, well, Barbara, you can come up and stay with me in my hotel room. There were about 7 or 8 people around us, and they all dropped their heads down there because they didn't understand that it was a sister-brother kind of thing, you know. So that was good.
And even that very meeting, I ended up staying that night with Richard Donner and slept in the same bed with him.
Right.
I don't think I ever told anybody that. Yeah.
Well, now I feel worse.
Yeah. Well, remember, Richard's gay, if that makes you feel any better.
Sue?
Yes. Karl?
I know.
Hello?
We can hear you. I can hear you.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Before you start talking, can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Dixie,
Oh, as long
oh,
as
you came back in. Okay.
Okay, I'll just use the phone. Thank you.
We'll let Sue go ahead, and then Dixie, you can wind it up.
I never
Sue?
Okay. I am trying to figure out how to do this. Picking up a reverb when my phone is on. So let me be sure I didn't lose Dixie. I think I did. And then we will be all back together again. There, Dixie, are you there now?
I'm here as long as I hold my phone. I'm good.
Okay, well, I have to keep you connected. Okay, so in order to make this work, I have to be connected to Dixie. So for me to talk about what we did in the beginning,
Yes.
I like you are a story person. So I'm going to tell the first story about how I started. And those of you who knew Norman, which are a lot of people on here, will appreciate this. So my kids were young. Most of you know my kids. They're not young anymore. And one Sunday afternoon, and everybody knows Norman's, you know, whatever. So he had told me this Waffle House, and this woman had thrown a ticket book at somebody else and hit him, and he was, you know, kidding her about being the next pitcher for the Atlanta Braves. Could have been this last season, right? Go Braves.
Oh.
So the next Sunday, he had told me about this woman. The next Sunday, he says, let's go shopping. Now, for Norman, that was Ace Hardware, you know, Lowe's, stuff like that. So we went shopping, had our children with us who were about 15 and 18 at the time. And this waitress was there. And she became one of my best friends in this lifetime. And so Norman was kidding her about, you know, being the pitcher for the Atlanta Braves. And so the little girl got out of an old beat up car and came to the door, knocking on the door of the Waffle House. She was too big to reach the door, so, you know, that handle. And so somebody let her in, and she came in, Mommy, 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 I gotta eat now. Get back in the car and I'll feed you in a little bit. Mommy, 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 Mommy. 2 seconds later, gotta go to the bathroom, get back in the car. When it's my break, I'll come get you. And so, you know, those of you know who Anna and Reba, they took her little girl to the bathroom, they got her a sandwich. And so we heard the story of the woman's life. They were homeless and lived in the car. Now, I'm not going to give you the rest of that fast forward, but she came to live with us a few months later. I know what day it was. It was May the 18th, because on the 19th, I said, what do you want for breakfast? And she said, I always have Blue Roses off birthday cakes. It was Norman's birthday the day before. So Danny came to live with us. And my grandmother had 13 children, and I lived on her farm. And there were always people coming to live with us. So I thought this would be a cakewalk, right? Wrong.
Let me just take a couple minutes so that I can get Dixie in.
Okay.
You got an hour.
I got an hour.
Yeah, you have an hour.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you, Sue. Go ahead.
Dixie, I promise I won't take the whole hour.
No, it's all right.
So anyway, Danny came to live with us. And for those of you who were here early, she had a slight stroke yesterday. And they're busy running tests, which is why I keep looking at the phone. But anyway, so it's been a long ride. And I, like so many other people who have spoken before me, would say to you, I believe that I was directed in this direction. I believe I was supposed to find her. I believe I was supposed to help her, and all of you were supposed to help me. And whoever you believe in, whatever you believe in, I believe it was the driving force for me to me being here now, because it certainly was not my free will. I would not have chosen this life if somebody had given me a choice. I've met the most wonderful people. I have the most wonderful daughters. I had the most wonderful husband.
Yes.
I learned so much about the needs of people. And when, you know, we are called the pioneers, we're not really the pioneers. We're just one tier of the pioneers.
Yes.
Let's learn from each other. If I wanted school, I called Dixie. If I wanted school, I called Patti. If I wanted policy, I called Jane. And I could go through all of our early founders. We all became each other's support. If Jane doesn't know how to get something done, she calls me. still happens to this day, and I to her.
And so I have to say this, and we all call each other to get that ERA Commons thing.
And hire him. He'll take the call. So it is the shoulders on which we stand, all of us. And I think I'm thankful every single day for all of you who've been such a part of my life for the last 30 plus years. And if I could leave everybody with a word of wisdom, and I don't want this to be the last word any of us speak today, it would be, it's what I tell our chapters in Georgia. Go to the Federation Conference. I'm so looking forward to us all being back together. I want hundreds of huggies, right? But you go to the other Federation conferences or other conferences where you meet people and you talk to them and you make lifelong friends and people you love and care for, and they become part of your village or part of your town. They become the people that keep you going when you're there in the middle of the night and something's going terribly, terribly bad. They're the people that are there for you. You know, if this flashbacks from across the years, it's like this rapid movie in my mind of all the things that not only you guys, but so many more of our people who, some of us aren't here with us at all. Some people are, you know, it's really hard to tell exactly where everybody is anymore, but I know that we have been there for each other. And I want to tell one more story that's little, Karl. My little story is we were 5 boards. We were in the $25,000 grant range, so that dates it for those of us.
Yes,
A long
there we go.
time. And so my board, we had been offered a contract because we had done a really good job with this little guy who was going to be sent to Montanari Hospital in Florida. He was 6 years old.
Oh,
And it did not have a good reputation. We went down and we got him, and we put him with another family. This was long before any rules prohibiting such stuff. And we went and we talked to Mom, and we got an IEP. Thank you, Dixie. And we got some special services. Thank you, Patti, who actually told me they existed. And we cleaned the house, and we got money for groceries, and we fixed her car. And we talked to them. And then when they went back to school, he came back about 4 weeks later, and he went back to his mom's house. And we went to the school with him. And we sat in the IEPs for a while. And so I kept in touch with her for a few years. And then the years went by. And then one day, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, maybe longer, I don't do years very well, I got this call, and she says, "Do you remember me?" I said, "Oh yeah, I remember you." She said, "I just wanted to tell you he entered Georgia Tech today on scholarship."
all right.
All right.
Yeah.
And I would think that for each of us, there's many of those families
Yes.
we never hear from. They're lost to us, but we're still changing the world, one family, one kid at a time. And you know, Karl, you wanted to hear the stories. So about that time, I started this and didn't finish it. We had a board meeting, and we had 5 people. And so we're sitting next to the Mental Health Association, who lent us space. That sound familiar to everybody? Mental
Yes,
Health Association lent us space. I got the idea from Barbara Huff, who was doing it up at the Federation. And we had a vote. And the vote was whether we could be provider agencies for the kids, the kid I just told you about, and other people in that county. We had been offered a contract to help stabilize families to keep children from being removed. And it became respite care. In the future, it became respite care, but it wasn't then. And so our board voted, and they were tied. 1 abstained and 2 on either side. And so, you know, I think I'll figure out I don't know what to do. And so I thought, well, there's Karl Dennis going around the country. And he's telling everybody he knows how to do this. It's no eject, no reject. We all got that, right? Right, we all got that. And so I called him up, and I didn't know him. And I got him on the phone. He actually answered. How about that? And so I said, "Karl, what happens? We're an advocacy organization of families, and I'm not sure myself how this should work. But we have no money, and we're going out of business. And we get $25,000 a year, and that's it. And Mental Health America gives us space. And what are we going to do? I think it's right for us to serve families in this county who are in need. All we're offering is family support to each other. And Karl talked a little bit about unconditional care and no reject, no reject. Then he told me a few stories. I love Karl's stories. I hope we'll tell you some today. And then he said, I think you ought to do it. And so this was on the old-fashioned phone, which I'm holding out like this so everybody can hear, right? No new technology there. And so we did it. And we would have been out of business, and we would have not been if Karl Dennis had not given us that exact information and help and support that day. And so let me see, that would have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 years.
Yes.
So maybe a little more.
More than that.
So Karl, that's the story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right. But that was not the one I wanted to hear. But
Which one do you want to hear, Karl?
I wanted to hear what you said to when you tried to get out of the parking lot and you didn't have any money.
Oh, this is a Georgia story. Back in the day, the DBHDD, which had a different name then, was a long time ago. And I was asked, as the first parent representing parents in the state of Georgia for mental health, they had a lot for DD, to go to this conference in Savannah, Georgia, and speak. And they didn't offer me a hotel room, and they didn't offer me lunch. So I had $5. So I had gas. I drove down there. I sat at the dinner where nobody served me. I spoke on the podium while nobody served me food. I got back to the parking lot, and the man said, well, you know, $8. It was under the hotel. Like, I think it was the Regency in Savannah on the waterfront. An unimaginable amount of money at that time in my life. And so I said, I don't have $8. He said, you have to pay $8. So I just calmly got out of the car, locked the car, sitting in the middle of the lane going out, and started walking away. He said, what do you think you're doing? I said, I don't have $8. I told you. I don't know where to get $8, so I guess I'm going to try to find somebody to take me back to Atlanta. Oh, just go. Don't worry about it. And that was my first thought about how families are actually treated. And 10, maybe 12 years after that, I made it my point to see at conferences that families tried to get everybody a fair shake. And I know that Barbara jumped right in there with me. We would run into all kinds of things. Very fast, but another one. I was invited to a child welfare meeting in Washington. And two women I didn't know were sitting in the lobby when I got there. I'd not been to many places. And so I walked in, and one of them was crying and the other one was trying to comfort her. I said, what's wrong? She says, well, we're from wherever they were from, wasn't Georgia. She said, and they gave us money 2 days ago to make this trip, and the lights were cut off, and I had to pay the lights, and my children didn't have food, and I had to buy food, and now I'm here and I can't eat, and I don't know what to do, and they want a deposit to get in the room. So from today, the way we're treated to back then is vastly different. I think people have learned some of our needs and to listen to us, and our voice is valued, but it's valued because all of the people that came before right now have paved that way for us. Okay, Karl, that's the one you wanted.
Yes, I did. I want you to tell me, because I think that young people need to hear that and need to understand that a lot. And that's why I think it's so important what you guys have gone through for the rest of the people, not necessarily for you, because it's been very difficult. So let's see.
I want to say one more thing, Karl.
Go ahead.
Patti and I have shared more leftovers together than anybody in the world. Patti arrives and she says, I just got here from Texas and I'm hungry and I have no food and I have no money. So we learned to save our leftovers for each other.
Yes. And another thing, when Texas, not me personally, but when I brought families with me, it was understood that we were going to share a room because I didn't have money to be getting these, I won't share a room with anyone kind of attitude. And we had slumber parties, and we brought, like one time we had a mom that did nails, and she brought her stuff and did nails, you know. And so one time in Florida, I dyed a parent's hair, you know, and we got so close. And I hope y'all can hear me. But now it's like, well, if I can't have my own room, and it's just so different because we built relationships sharing rooms.
Yeah.
Karl, I want to say one more thing about that room thing. Dixie. I went to, I was the director of the Federation. I had working for me, Gail Daniels, who was Muslim, and she was also, no, she wasn't working for me yet. She was the president of our board at the time. And then I had several families from Casey's sites that were very diverse. And Casey had paid for their way to come to the Federation conference, and they'd given us some money to pay their way. And I get to Florida to the conference one morning, and they are sitting actually kind of laying on the sofas. And I said, Gail, what's wrong? And she said, well, we came last night and nobody would let us in. I came so totally unglued. It was the University of South Florida. By the time I was done with them, they put Gail in a suite at the top, you and a sauna. Do you remember that, Jane? A great huge sauna tub or jacuzzi tub.
Right.
And I thought, well, it does pay to get mad. And then I had the whole staff meet with me. And this is not the way to do business. It was just, it was horrifying. Okay, Dixie.
I'm going to say goodbye. I've got to hit the road, and I love you all so much, and I hope we do this again.
All right.
Love you too, Patti.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Patti. Dixie, you there?
A resident IEP expert.
Among other things.
Among other things.
Dixie?
You're on mute, sweetie. No, we can't hear you.
Excuse me.
Dixie, can you push a button to get you off mute?
Drink, bring your drink. No, get my purse and come help me.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, to see you now.
Oh, how about that?
Hey, sweetie, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Okay. Where are you?
I am in Las Vegas, Sin City.
You
Hey,
haven't left yet.
beautiful.
I live here taking care of my sister.
Oh, okay. All right.
Love you, Sue.
Love you too.
Well, I came to the Federation probably a little differently. I mean, exactly the same, but in some ways different. But I'm going to start out with a story that relates to the stories that Sue was just telling. And that is that for the first 2 years at the Federation conference, when parents came, and we had lots of parents from out of state. I don't know how many of you remember the families from Indiana. Most of them had never left the borders of their state before, and there they were at a conference. No idea about what to eat or how to eat. One was diabetic. So for the first 2 years of the Federation conference, I slept in the lobby. And I gave my room to families because they needed it and I didn't. I knew I could go home and sleep. And I think we've all been lucky enough to have made those sacrifices on behalf of families.
Yes. Yes.
But what made me angry, and even in the early years of the Federation, I guess I'm always going to be pissed off about something. There just weren't very many families of color there. And we kept hearing people say, once we've established, we'll get more families involved. But at the same time, I was working with families who didn't even know there were laws that protected them, let alone what laws were or services were. So we spent a lot of time just trying to figure out how to convince families that they have a right to have their child treated decently. And I'm not talking IEPs or special ed. I'm talking about mental health in general. The first year I got involved, I was set out, given a task by Pacer Center, the organization I work for, to find out how many states provided mental health services to kids in any form. It could be a county, a city, it could have been a statewide. And one of the first people I talked to of the 14 states that we found that provided any service was the Alaska Youth Project. And when I heard what they were doing in Alaska, I wanted to move. I just wanted to go up there because I'm already living in snow being from Minnesota. But I just wanted to be part of something that would help the kids. And especially, and still, I think one of the things is we admire where we've come from and how far we've come and how hard we've worked to get there. The road ahead of us is still longer than the one behind. There is still an enormous amount of work to do. And so for the young people that might be listening in, please don't think we've hit the end of the road. Don't get complacent about what it is you think you're entitled to, or the families you work with will be entitled to down the road, because they can go away as easily as they appeared. And that was the thing that drove me, I think, more than anything else. We had families who did not know what it meant to have rights. And I'm talking about American-born families. Then when you put on top of that the immigrant families who are so relieved that there are any services available, then they don't ask for the things they truly need. It is clear we have a long, long way to go. And it's also clear that we have enough young people out there interested and moving forward that we can do this. That's the thing I want to impress on everybody. When I listen to you ladies talk, it's almost daunting what you've gone through to get to where you are. And if I listen in on that, I can easily say, my God, the work is done, or I can say it's too hard. It is neither. It isn't finished and it's not too hard. It is the most exciting, the most rewarding business, enterprise, support you'll ever be engaged in your life. And for those of you who are listening who have mental health needs, in America today, who doesn't? But for those of you who have genuine needs for mental health services, please, please don't give up insisting that those services meet your needs. Insisting that they be what you are about, what you need. Have a voice in your own care, in your own future, and your own resilience, because if you don't, it can go away. And that still is the most frightening thing to me after all these years. I'll be 75 in a week. I'm tired. You know, I'm not tired of being mad.
Yeah.
But I'm tired. And I think when I think back of the history, it's almost difficult for me to remember from here to where, from here to eternity. How did we start? How hard was it? It wasn't hard. It was a great adventure. Even getting the money, as difficult as it was a great adventure. I had the advantage at some point in my life of working for an organization called Pacer Center, which was a school-based parent advocacy center. And I was irritated with them because when I looked at who we were serving, they were really wonderful parents, but they were all white and middle class primarily. And so if we're going to fight the good fight, we have to have a room full of brown and black and yellow people. We just can't do it for the middle class. So that's the other thing I wanted to say to people is if you're really interested in serving others, make sure you serve the diversity of your community, because without it, we're going nowhere.
You know, Carl, I want to say something. Because Dixie, it's horrible to be the only person on track about diversity, and she did. And really, when I think back about us taking on that Urban Children's Mental Health Initiative, here I was from Kansas, and Casey Foundation said, what does a tall white woman think she's going to do with this initiative? And I said, I've got to surround myself with the right people. And Dixie, if you remember, we had 2 board members that quit because we took on that Urban Children's Mental Health Initiative, because
I remember.
They thought we were going to become an all Black organization.
Well, yes.
Sad. But Dixie, I have to say, you know, besides her being an expert on education, she was an expert on keeping us focused on not just diversity, but focus on everything. And we'd get sidetracked, she'd bring us right back. And we would think of a name of our organization, we'd think of a name, and Dixie would say no, and we can't because. And so it was always, you know, when I hear her say right now, you know, about diversity and about where we are and how far we have yet to go, it just, all those old bells ring in my head, Dixie, that you rung and kept us lined up.
Well, you know, Barbara, our voices are going to be stilled because none of us are getting younger. So we need for these kids and the young people and the future of this organization and the future of mental health services for kids, we need for them to understand how hard it is, how rewarding, how difficult, and how incredibly important it is that we serve the multitude of families in this country and not just the ones who have money.
Right.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I have a soapbox. I climb on it every day for one thing or another.
That's why we're doing this.
Hey, Carl.
I promise Sue that I'll tell a story, and this might be one she's never heard. I had two young men in independent living services, and both of them had grown up in the mental health system or in the child welfare and juvenile system. And they met at Kaleidoscope, and they met at one of our offices. And we always had people around, but we never really saw them develop any kind of relationship, anything. We were always worried about gangs in those days. Oh my God, are they in the Disciples or in the Vice Lodge or whatever? And so they both went two different ways. One of them wound up trying to rob somebody, hit him in the head with a garbage can and killed him. And he wound up going into prison from there. The other one, and you probably heard me talk about Troy in the past, who was the only kid that they ever called me up when he was in the juvenile detention, asked me, would I please take him back because he was causing so much trouble in the juvenile detention center. So he's the one that got thrown out of jail. So, but he was so bright and so wonderful that he wound up going back. And I don't know, the day that Kathy and I got married, he was supposed to be at the wedding and he never really showed up, and he never lets me forget that. So they went along in parallel tracks. But every time I talked to Troy, he'd ask me about David. And every time I talked to David, he had asked me about Troy. And I didn't think too much of it then. And I have learned now to listen to people a little better, I think. And so Troy then winds up suing the state of Illinois justice system for some stuff that happened in, and he winds up with two settlements. The second one he never got. The first one was for $18,000 that he got. And so he said he wanted Kathy and I to take care of the money for him. And I said, okay, we'll do that. He wanted to give us some, of course, we wouldn't do that. And so then he said to me, I want you to take $1,000 and send it to David. And I didn't know they had that kind of friendship at all. So I said, okay. So then it became Kathy and I's chore to really go out and find a bank to take the money in. This is the strangest things about banks. They don't always want to take your money. And, you know, it used to be you could open up a checking account or any kind of account you want. And so they kept telling us over and over again in 3 or 4 different banks that they didn't have a relationship with Troy, so they couldn't take his money into the bank. So one day I got frustrated, and we were at the Fifth Third Bank, and they had at first told us that they would be able to do something. And then they told us that unfortunately, he doesn't have a relationship with this bank. And I looked at him and I said, oh, you're wrong. Of course he has a relationship with your bank. He said, what's the relationship? I said, he's robbed your bank. And that's how he wound up in jail. You know, and if you'd have seen the look on this guy's face, you know, and so of course they didn't let us put the money in there. We wound up with another bank. But what was to me, what's so important about the whole thing was that that he would send money to David. They hadn't had that much, but they had things in common, and he had money and he wanted to use it. He wanted to share it with it. So that's for a lot of us. Then and this is something I've been talking to Ira about. You know, we talk about throwing pebbles in the water and the ripples that go out, and how many staff people they touch, and how many family members they touch, and in a lot of ways, we have changed the system. I ran into, I just got out of the hospital 2-3 weeks ago, and hospitals are incredible now. They actually had somebody call up and ask me how I was doing, and could I get, did they need me to work with their Medicare and a whole bunch of stuff. And then at the end, the woman said to Kathy, I used to work for your husband 30 years ago, and we've used those same kind of approaches that we learned then. And so I think that's so incredible that we have touched so many people, and maybe it's just a little bit for some, and maybe it's a lot for others, but it keeps spreading out. So I wanted to get that, because every time you get frustrated, it's nice to know something positive that's come along and helping to.
Carl, could I say something?
Sure, don't ask me, you can control me.
So guys, through all these years from beginning to end, one important part for our success, speak for mine, but I've watched yours, so I know it's true for you, are the parents who have worked with and who have represented us and who have managed to stay in Washington, D.C. representing us. So I think it's really, really, really important. You know, I would have never had a grant if it hadn't been for Judith Katz-Levy in the first place, supported by Ira Laurie, her boss. I was trying to write the first grant, and you know, I didn't have a high school diploma, and I didn't know how to write, and I was pretty sure I couldn't do it no matter what happened. And so I called this woman in Washington, and I said, Miss Katz-Levy, I want to do this, but I don't know how. And she went step by step, telling me how to write the first grant. Another turning point, because I you know, through the years, this has been the kind of like, not certainly the biggest money, but the piece of my funding that has provided the most direction and has tied me to you guys. Every year we're tied to you through this piece of money, not the largest piece of money in the world, but perhaps the most important for the movement through the years. And Ira Laurie, our dear friend, was part of that. Judith Katz-Levy became my dear friend through absolute, I swear to you, the woman couldn't have been any nicer or kinder to me. And that was from the point of knowing absolutely nothing. Yes, Dixie, I was one of the people that was told my kid didn't have any rights in school and they threw her out. I didn't know any different. So, I just want to hear a minute from Liz, from her point of view. You've carried us for a long time now, Liz.
Oh, I didn't think you were wrong.
Here I am. I'm here for you, Carl.
Thank you.
One of the things that is really important to me is the legacy that Judy left for me when I came to the office. And every time I have to make a decision, I think about, so what was the original intent, and what would Ira do? What would Ira think? What would Judy do? What would Judy think? And I really have tried to stay as true as possible to what the original intent was. And that hasn't been easy, because everybody who comes to federal government wants to leave their imprint. And so there have been times when we've gone down paths and roads that have not been as helpful to families as they should have been. And when I came to federal government, I'll never forget, when I was going through the application process, and once the invitation for the job was given, Karl was one of the very first people who contacted me, and he said, "Do you have any idea what the hell you're getting yourself into?" And thank God I didn't. I had no idea. And so I have used that legacy of Judy Katz-Levy and Ira as my North Star in doing this work. And I've just started my 24th year with SAMHSA. And in that 24 years, I've seen a lot of people come and go. I've seen a lot of ideas come and go. I've had to bite my tongue often. But Dixie, you are one of the people who has kept me going, because when I channel that anger that you talk about, it's in an effort to bring people back to, why are we even here? Why do we exist? And one person said to me one day, they brought me something to my desk, and they said, now this is an emergency and we have to have this turned around by close of business. And I just looked at him and I said, "Oh," I said, "tell me more." I said, "Is somebody going to die if I don't get this back to you by close of business? What is the emergency?" And they just looked at me and I said, "I know what an emergency is. I get calls from families every day about what a true emergency is. This piece of paper is not an emergency." I said, "I will get it to you as quickly as I can." But I said, "This is not an emergency." That woman, who continues to work for federal government, has never used that word again. And so I think what Karl said about how we have influenced and taught people is really important. And the people whose lives that Karl has touched in teaching people what wraparound is really about, and that it's not a service, it's not a product, it's none of that. And Karl, I use one of your stories as my own excuse on more than one day. You have told the story oftentimes about the young man that people warned you about and warned you about and warned you about, that he was a fire starter and someday he was going to burn your place down. And sure enough, he started a fire and he burned your place down. And so for following that, the number of times people would ask you for something and you would say, "Gee, I think that burned up in the fire." Well, our office has moved from the Park Lawn building out to Chokecherry, and then we turned around and we moved back to the Park Lawn building. And now when somebody asks me for something, I look at them and I say, "I think that got thrown away when we moved from the Park Lawn building."
Yeah.
So, Karl, thank you for all of the ways that you have influenced my life. And
That's very sweet.
Yep.
But I think it's all of us doing this together. I really believe that, and just a little here and a little there. All of the top officials that I have met throughout my career, for example, in education, in the federal government, when I couldn't figure out what it really meant and I needed to know, I never called them. I called Patti and I called Dixie to tell me exactly what it meant. And that's what we all do, probably still today, is get in touch with each other and say, "What the hell is this?" One of the things that still haunts me is Harvard, and I'm going to name the university, is Harvard University. I was so, had my chest stuck out so far because I had been chosen to come and do a 3-year thing in child welfare with this committee. The first day of the committee, I had a headache at the end people use so many words that I did not understand that I was always saying, what does that mean? What does that mean? So for the second day, I said to them, I said, you know, one of the things that we're going to talk about families and we're going to talk about children. Don't you guys think we need to have family members as part of this group? There was about 25 people. And the woman who was in charge of it said to me, well, that would have been nice, but I don't think that they would have been able to understand what we were talking about. And at that particular point, I thought about the people that I knew, and I just started laughing. I think they thought I was crazy. And I told them, I'm sure just a couple of them would have been able to figure it out. And I said, I was not one of them. It took me, I guess, by the fifth meeting, I started to understand what the hell they were talking about. It took that long. And so that's, you know, I don't know why people find it so necessary to talk to people and try to impress them with language that they know they're not going to understand, you know. So that's one on the side. So now, I want to get a commercial in here too. Barbara's got a podcast, right? When can we hear it? How do we go about seeing it?
Scott will have it, or I can forward it because Scott sent me the information. I did an hour and a half for Scott, and he can get it to you. It's the Children's Mental Health Network.
Okay.
And if you email him, he'll get it to you. And if you have trouble getting it or trouble getting him, let me know.
So we ought to tell the people who are listening in who Scott is. I mean, we know what to do, but would they?
You mean who started the Federation, you mean?
No. I'm talking about people who have tuned into this to learn from you guys. And so one of the things they can learn is who's Scott.
Yes, that's true. That's absolutely.
Okay. So at some way, maybe I depend on Sue so much, and everybody's got her number. So if you're out there and you're listening and you want to know something about this podcast, please call Sue. Oh, okay. The other thing is that I want everybody to hold on to their seat now, because this is going to be a rough one. Ira, Lori, and I are writing another book.
Oh.
And actually, it's realizing that a lot of the stories and stuff that we told were not finished because we didn't know what, we didn't put in what happened to those people in the end. So we're involved in doing that. Ira's doing almost 100% of the writing. I tell him stories, he writes, and we come up with it. Now, the last book we wrote took 6 years. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to really finish this. So the other thing is that Ira and I will be on Sue's, what do we call that thing in December? Sue, you still there? No, she disappeared.
Yeah, Carl, I'm here.
Okay, Sue, what do you call that thing we're doing in December?
It's our Tuesday support and education for parents. It started with a small support group virtually in Atlanta, Georgia, for people in Georgia when COVID hit, and now we have a nationwide following. Just people tuning in.
So how do you get to that?
You can look on our website, www.gpsn.org.
Okay.
You can call me, 404-242-0349. You know, and anywhere you can just ask for Lisa Pace. Was my idea, but she surely has brought it around, hadn't she? For those of you who've been on it, either as participants or as audience.
As who? Barbara whispered in my ear over here, telling me that to have you talk about Brian Comstock.
Scott.
Sue, what do you want him to talk about? Who he is? Talk a little bit about who Brian is and what he does. Both of you, Barbara, Sue.
Well, I'll start because I don't know him nearly as well as Barbara does, but I know him a lot. So he was one of the first people in the first years of the Federation that made me know I wanted to be there with Richard Donner. So I'm a knockover for silent auctions or stuff like that. So we had a silent auction. And tell you what, we couldn't get away with things like we did then. Look at Barbara shake her head. So we have the silent auction, and people bring things from all over the United States for the silent auction. And of course, I am the person who's there from morning till night because that's who I am. And so the first time I went, I went every year, but the first time that Richard Donner that you've heard about and Scott Comstock were there, Barbara's going to laugh out loud. We had everything from university presidents to esteemed teachers to parents from home. And we're in this auditorium and there's this layout of stuff and we're all bidding on it. And okay, shall I tell the unabridged version, Barbara? Scott's running the auction. Scott's running the auction for us. And Richard is performing for us. And he's like dancing on tables. It is so absolutely hysterically funny thinking back on it. And all the money made was donated to the Federation. And fast forward a few years, maybe 20, and I asked them, would you do that again? And they said, we'd all be arrested. So we had a lot of fun back in the day, but Scott has been a believer and a supporter almost since day one. I don't know what year he came in, but it was very early. He has never said he's a family member. He has represented us. He has at one time wrote our newsletter. He has produced our conferences. He's helped us secure talent for the Federation in one way or another. All around, amazingly good guy. Personally, he was one of the people that my Norman always talked to at conferences and hung out with and stuff like that. And so when Norman needed a lung transplant, Scott offered us to stay in his home in North Carolina. It didn't happen because that had nothing to do with Scott. And then when Norman died, I look up and there is Scott coming down the road at the funeral, for the funeral. So these are the kinds of friendships we've made. Scott, as far as I can remember, almost the whole journey, he's been with us for anything we ever needed him to do. Barbara, you know him better than I do.
He was the most incredible partner I could ever imagine having. And I always wanted to count on him. And he planned, and I partnered with him. So he did the planning of some of the most incredible conferences I have ever been in my life. And I remember at a reception at a conference, a woman said to Scott and I were sitting there, and she said, you know, I expect sound tables, and we have spare tables. And, you know, Scott did the same thing. He went out and got a round table, brought it in, put a tablecloth on it. And, you know, in our cultural competence, Scott and I learned everything together. And there's teachers like Dixie and others. But a couple of women came to us one morning and said, you know, this continental breakfast idea at this conference, we have to have a meal because we have diabetes. And these two women never did Scott anything. He just said, you tell me what the meal needs to look like. And every day after that, those two women had 4 meals. And we finally learned, you know, like I said the whole day, continental breakfast isn't for everybody. So, anyway, he was an incredible partner for many, many years. And I have huge respect for him. And I just can't say enough. He and I have some very funny stories, some very serious stories. We had to interview him, Karl, for some of his stories because he does have some good ones. You know, also, I know we've got like 15 minutes left. Jane and I last couple of nights ago, 10 o'clock at night, we had a pretty incredible conversation about parent support. And I don't know if Jane would feel like I'm putting her on the spot, but I'd really like for her to share a few thoughts. You know, it was one of the very first, when the Federation started, we had about 5 things that we knew we needed to focus our advocacy efforts on. And, you know, one of those 5 was always family support, along with education, along with mental health services, something in between a 50-minute mental health center and a bed. We knew we had to focus on the custody issue, so we didn't have to give up custody of our children to get services. We knew we needed more research. We knew that we needed trained people doing this work. And there were a lot of things we knew we needed that we spoke about. What's interesting is that I talked to Jane or Sue or anybody, it seems like it always comes back to parent support. And yeah, it's where we started. And I thought maybe Jane would share some of her thoughts. Do you feel put on the spot by that, Jane? Probably.
Oh, Barbara, anywhere, anytime, I'm willing to talk about parent support.
Good.
You know, not only, I'm just going to talk about myself. I had no idea what I was doing, and most of the time I don't know that I still do. But I came to this group, I came to the people on this screen because I wanted to save my daughter's life. And, you know, the people, individuals, and this group, you were willing to listen to me. You were willing to be with me, call me anytime. And you got me involved one by one in doing things, in being part of something that was important. And framing that, and I was in bad shape for much of this experience we've had together. I remember Karl in Traverse City one time. That's when I met you. You were heading off to be the big presenter, and you passed me by in the hallway and said, "Girl, what's the matter with you?" And you stopped and talked to me and told the people they could wait for the presentation for a little bit. My son had just been downlifted by the Marines into one of those African countries that we were trying to do something with. But I mean, you said, "I'm here all weekend. Here's where you can talk to me." I mean, you just were there, and everybody, you taught us all to be there for each other, and that's how we've translated that to helping other parents and other people, and asking people what they need. I've never been in a meeting with Richard Donner where he didn't start by saying, "What do you need? Just tell us that." And I think I found a family. I also found a whole way of life. I don't call it a career, but it is a way of life. It's just to honestly help people, and I'm very proud of that. And I need you to know that at 50 years of age, my daughter has 2 degrees. She has a good job. One day, I'm sure she'll take over what I'm doing. But my daughter's okay most of the time, a lot of the time. And sometimes she's not, but we manage that. And I have a family I would not have if it were not for the parent support, the friends that I have made through this group. And I hope people listening to this are able to do that still, COVID or not, with our partners, our colleagues, our peers, our friends. They're friends for me on this group. You have saved my family. You've given me a family. And so thank you.
Could I piggyback on that for a second? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. One of the things that has occurred to me over the years, again and again, is I have no idea what parents need. I really don't know. And at first, in my arrogance as a advocate, I would make assumptions. And I've been told so many times by parents, sorry, I was full of crap, didn't know what I was talking about. And you know, they're right. They know. And I think that's the part of me that I never want to forget. When parents are loud or angry or swear at me, they have the same story as the parent who knows 24 fancy words that they can interject into their sentence. The knowledge about the child is there. And I think that's the part that I learned over time that I did not know initially, because I thought I was a pretty good parent there when I had a daughter who did everything I asked her to. And then my son gave me some humility, but it really came from the families who knew their kids and who told me that I needed to listen to them.
Yeah.
I'd like to say that we have 7, 8 minutes maybe. I want to say that it's been nice to be with everybody, and you are my family and my strength. And I'm thinking of names that have gone by. Each one of us will have a slightly different list. I was thinking of Gail. She used to call me a spirit named Sue for years and years and years when I would call the Federation. I was talking about Barbara Samples in Montana, who we went through years of she was on the call list. This is what Barbara can do, and this is who she is, and her wonderful, what she's given to this. And then there was Peggy Nichols in Wyoming. And I name these names because they're people who directly affected my life forever. Each one of us would have a slightly different list. There would be more people on some and less on some. But it is a large, we are a few people. But underneath all this, there are a lot of us who have come through this together. For Karl, he has his own. I would be remiss in any recounting of this today if I didn't say Angela Nelson. And everybody who is part of this knows Angela. And for those of you who don't know, she was one of our kids. And Angela's life changed history, literally. It fueled Karl's passion for years. So it's not just our families or us, and it's our children. It's their experiences that you will learn from when we stand on each other's shoulders. It's so important that we honor. I mean, I watched Karl learn from Ira and Ira learn from Karl most of these 30 years. So, you know, it's the willingness to give what you have to give and be able to take what other people have to give you. Okay, Karl.
True enough.
Karl, do you think anybody out there has a question? Can they ask that? Are we set up to do that or not?
What was that?
We have like 6 minutes.
Okay.
Can people ask questions? Maybe either in the chat box or something.
You have 6 minutes. I promised I would be on time. Does anybody want to say a word? 5 minutes, Kelsey says. My iPhone must be wrong.
Well, I think that we could use more people in this process. I think, Sue, you're right. And I think we ought to try to figure out how to do this for a longer period of time where people could just put their feet up and just let themselves go. And I think that the whole idea of the book, and we had this thing about also where we don't ask people to participate and to do things. We just tell them they're going to do it, you know. And so if I ever get this thing together for this book of all the founders' stories, Dixie's going to write it. She knows, I told her she was going to write it. And so that's it. But I'm just trying to find some money to do it. So I have some things that I feel like that I want to do before I just give up completely. And that certainly is one of the things for me. And I want to say to you guys again that you are my one-man bands. You are my people who could do everything. You know, you could do everything, and what you couldn't do, you call one of the other ones, and you can put it together and make it work. So I want to thank you for what I've learned from all of you, and want you to know that I really appreciate you. And that was it. Kathy, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Carl, this is Liz. I just want to close with one thing. As a family member whose child who brought me into this work and took us on the wild ride, Mr. Toad's wild ride through the world of mental health, as a family member whose son wasn't able to maneuver the mental health world and died as a result of suicide, I just want to say thank you to everybody, because there aren't many groups who will stick with you through thick or thin. And once TJ died, people reached out to me in ways that were very, very, very important to me. My own fear was, if I can't do this successfully for my own son, then what business do I have saying that I have a way or a path for other people to get what they need? And the people who reached out, everyone who is on this panel today and others who reached out to me and have been a support all of these years, has been really important. And I know that there are other families who are in the very same situation I am, who have said, this is the family who never left me. And so on behalf of my family and all of those other families, thank you, all of you, for everything that you do.
Thank you, people that are thanking us from the chat. Thank you for being with us today. We really appreciate your work and that you're here to listen. And I promise you, you'll build your own villages.
Thank you, Sue.
And be sure and ask Liz about the kid we talked, whose grandparents spoke Polish, and we taught him how to curse in Polish so that he could stay in school.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. We love you. All of us love you.
I love you guys.
And never give up. Never give up.
Never ever give up.